I felt like everyone had given up on this possibility. And I just remember pulling up a picture of an airplane. Every morning, I'd just spend a couple seconds envisioning what it would be like to really fly this plane, despite all the setbacks I faced over a course of 2 years.
Wednesday. If in fact you are listening to this podcast on the day it aired, which is a Wednesday. If not, I hope your day is off to a great start. If you're listening to it in the evening, I hope you've had a wonderful day filled with freedom and fulfillment. This is the Freedom Club Podcast. I am your host, Curt Mercadante. Thank you for being here today. And because it is Wednesday, it is time for our interview segment. And I tell you today, we have an incredible guest. Her name is Jessica Cox. She holds the world record. She was born without arms, yet she is a pilot of an airplane, by the way, that was not tricked out specifically for someone without arms. She flies the damn thing with her feet. It's an amazing interview. Not only is she a pilot, and she did it, by the way, to overcome her fear of flying. She's a black belt, the state champion in Taekwondo. She's going to begin rock climbing soon. She plays the piano. So in today's episode, you hear Jessica's incredible story and how she has declared freedom from fear and how she's helping others to do the same. Now, by the way, this interview was conducted live in the Freedom Club community. I pitch that community each and every episode because if you're not a member, what the hell is your problem? Go to Facebook right now, search for the Freedom Club community, answer a few questions, we'll let you in. If you were a member, you could have participated in this interview live and asked questions as we were going. So please head there today. But without further delay, here's my interview with the amazing Jessica Cox, the world's first armless pilot.
Welcome to the Freedom Club Podcast, where we strive to pull you out of your life of quiet desperation, out of your comfort zone of misery, and propel you into a life of freedom and fulfillment. And now, here's your host for this journey, international speaker and coach, and serial entrepreneur, Curt Mercadante.
We are here with Jessica Cox. We're going to learn all the amazing things about Jessica during the course of this interview. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be on.
And you were doing a TEDx talk last week in Tel Aviv, correct?
Yes, it was an exciting time.
How did that go?
Well, it was really awesome. About 2,500 people at the Opera House in downtown Tel Aviv.
Wow.
And it was an amazing experience.
That's awesome. And I want to talk about your motivational speaking career, which, I want to talk about your entire amazing life. But first, and I always ask this first because sometimes I forget to ask it, so I want to make sure to ask it first. This is the Freedom Club Podcast, and it's all about people. It's not just about freedom in the political context or the social context or whatever, but it's about living the freedom lifestyle and living without fear, doing the things you want to do versus the things you feel compelled to do, or living a life you think you're supposed to live, et cetera, et cetera. So the first question I want to ask you is, what does the word freedom mean to you?
Well, I love how you said living life free of fear and being able to do the things you want to do. And I have just never seen myself as a fearful person. I mean, most people think of me as fearless. And that's how I've been since I was a kid. And for me, living that mindset of being fearless and not really letting anything hold me back has led to so many things and is why I am where I am right now. Because if I hadn't taken the opportunities that have come across my path in very odd ways, I really wouldn't have been able to achieve even becoming a pilot, becoming the world's first armless pilot. And I love freedom, whatever expression it is, if it means being in an airplane and the freedom of flight, that for me is incredible. If it's the freedom of being an entrepreneur and having more room to do the things you love to do, like flying or Taekwondo for me, or hiking or riding my recumbent trike around, that's a wonderful freedom as well.
That's awesome. And I want to talk about all those wonderful things, amazing things. I mean, they're amazing for someone who has two arms, much less no arms. But going back, I mean, for our audience, so you were born without arms, correct? And it was something that I'm reading your bio and reading the background. It was something that it was pretty unexpected. I mean, sometimes things happen and parents know beforehand, but it was someone unexpected.
It was very unexpected for both my parents because they did the whole sonograms and I guess in the 80s, the sonograms were not as precise as they are now, where you could see the 3D image of the baby. So they didn't have any indication early on that I didn't have the arms develop in utero.
Wow. And I hate it. It was an article that in an interview with you, and it was about you, and it used the term birth defect. And I can't stand that term because we are who we are and we're born the way we are. And I talk a lot about superpowers and unleashing your superpowers. And, our superpowers may be, it was Malcolm Gladwell in his book, and he talked about people who, not despite challenges, but because of their challenges, ended up being kind of superheroes in their own areas, in their own communities, in their own lives. And you're someone I think that 100% applies to.
Well, I guess a lot of people have said that. They have compared me in a way to that. And I take that humbly and I love to live the way I do. And whether it's a superpower or not, or if it's just living life without limits.
There's a lot of us can get held back or become prisoners of our frames of reference. And our frames of reference are what we know, and they're our comfort zone. And so kind of going beyond that, that's why I always urge people to travel, see the world. You'll learn things that you were like, oh, wait, you'll learn to accept people more. You'll learn, that way you've been doing things your whole life isn't the only way you can do them. You feel those things. But a lot of people, I was talking to someone yesterday and he had gotten a Tesla and it's got the autopilot where it drives itself. Mm-hmm. And he said, so he's in his 40s and he said, I know it's going to work. But when I come up to an intersection and there's kids playing ball and I'm like, I know it's going to turn. He said, every time I grab the wheel and at the last minute, I'm like, it's not going to turn. And we talked, I said, what's so funny is your kids are going to grow up with that technology. And for them, they're not going to have a fear in their mind that the car's not going to turn. For us, it's like my 5-year-old can figure out my iPhone better than I can. But those frames of reference. And so certain people are put in a certain situation, have to step out of that comfort zone and face a challenge when they're 25 or 30. Physical challenge, mental challenge. This is the only frame of reference you've ever known. Yes. I mean, you were born, what do you tell people? And you've been for 13 years, have been going out and giving speeches and meeting with people. What do you tell people who face a challenge, whether it's physical or mental, when they're 20 or 25, and it's a new frame of reference for them?
It's definitely a completely different experience for someone who has grown up living a certain way versus someone who has lost something or something has dramatically changed for them. And I always have to tell people, take, for example, I've spoken to a number of veterans and who have lived with all their limbs and all of a sudden they've lost a limb or two. And I tell them that, I will never really know or fully understand what you're going through because this is how I've lived my whole life. But what I can tell you is some of the things that I've learned along the way. And in reality, my not having arms has been advantageous to me from the start because I've had to learn at a very young age when we're resilient, we're very flexible, and we're learning so much in such short timing. I've had to learn all that at a young age, how to be a problem solver. And that has actually brought the best out of me. So for those who have had to go through something that's traumatic, they may learn things that they never would have even challenged themselves with if they lived their whole life without some kind of obstacle.
That's amazing. You referred to it as almost as an advantage, and my very first guest over a year ago was Marcus Aurelius Anderson, who was training to deploy in the military and broke his back in 2 places, was paralyzed from the neck down completely for a year, and came out of it. And he wrote a book with the same title, and he said that it was a gift to him. And in the middle of it, it didn't seem that way, but then you said it's an advantage. And we hear a lot of talk about, I mean, there's the political and societal aspects of it, right? But then when you talk about business or whatever, kind of the term privilege, or you have it made and you have it made. Sometimes people who supposedly have it made, like you said, they haven't had anything to test their resilience in their entire life. And so when it comes along when they're 25 or 30, it's very tough for them to handle.
That's true. It's almost like this adversity quotient that people have a certain amount of in their life. And if they have a little bit of it, they can build up and figure out ways of dealing with it. But then all of a sudden, if they get hit with all this adversity at once, it's more of a struggle for someone maybe who hasn't had it as difficult.
And, you have apparently decided to put more adversity on yourself and more challenges and step out of your comfort zone in numerous ways throughout your life. You've mentioned being a pilot, Taekwondo. I want to get to that. But I read that at a young age, you decided to not have prosthetics.
Yes. And it sounds odd that I had the option of prosthetics. And I decided not to go with them because for me, my feet are more effective, more efficient than using prosthetics. Because if you think about it, when you're using appendages that are not real flesh and bone, it's a longer mental process to achieve the task that you're trying to do with that appendage. Because you have to think what you want to do, think about how you're going to achieve it, and then tell the prosthetic limb to do that. So all that time that it takes to actually accomplish something, it's a lot faster just for me to use my toes and grab whatever item I need to pick off the floor, or write out something with my foot, or grab a piece of food and put in my mouth. It's faster.
Wow. That's amazing. So growing up, how was school? Was it rough going in school? Was it, when kids can be cruel, many times we hear, talk about bullying and those types of things. Or did you have a relatively kind of, I don't want to say good experience or fine experience with others growing up in your school and your community?
Well, for me personally, it was challenging because I didn't like being different. And I think that everyone goes through that stage in their adolescence when they want to be like everyone else. So it makes it very difficult when no matter what you do, you'll never be like everyone else. You'll always stand out. And you're having to fight against that. And so there was a struggle there during those years of junior high and high school when you want to just be one of the other girls. But no matter what you do, how do you blend in if you don't have arms? You're going to attract unwanted attention. You're going to attract stares or comments or even bullying at times because you stand out.
Right. What was there a spark where you kind of decided, I'm going to, I don't want to say stand out on purpose, but I'm going to become the first armless pilot in history. I'm going to go get a black belt in Taekwondo. I'm going to do all these things? Or was it just kind of a gradual journey to get there?
Oh, it was definitely a gradual journey for me, because if you would have asked me even right towards my end of my college, if you would have asked me, what are you going to do after college? I would have never envisioned the possibility of even flying an airplane. I mean, it would never been out of question, but just what had to happen for that all to come together and make it possible that I can literally fly a plane alone with my feet. And this is not a customized airplane. This hasn't been built for me. This is a standard airplane that I am certified to fly. I probably would have thought you were crazy if you would have asked me as a sophomore in college.
Wow. So what you went for it. Now you've been flying for a long time. You took some time off. When was the actual official world record broken?
I had no idea going into flying that I would actually have achieved a world record. In fact, I was told that because any kind of record has to be measurable and has to be essentially beatable, and being the first of anything isn't necessarily a world record. So it wasn't until a year after being a certified pilot when the Guinness World Record team came to me and said, how would you like to travel to Milan, Italy to receive this Guinness World Record medal? It's official. You'll be in the book and the publication. We're going to give you the medal and everything. And I said, wow, this is wonderful. So I didn't even think about that it was going to achieve that, but it was wonderful to have that. I mean, I did it for other reasons. I was flying because I wanted to overcome my fear of flight, and I wanted to be an example in my career as a speaker that you shouldn't let fear stand in the way of an opportunity. Those were my motivations, but it ended up becoming this wonderful thing to be able to say, now I have this Guinness World Record medal for it.
Wow. So not only do you not have arms, which I certainly would assume. Well, let me ask you this. I was going to say, I would assume that makes it more complicated to fly a plane, but since you've never had arms, to you, did it seem as complicated as it would seem for me with arms? Does that make sense?
I see what you're saying, yes. And actually I have to put myself in that whole frame of mind, because when I think about accomplishing anything, I think of it through my feet. But because I'm doing it with my feet, but I'm observing people do it with their hands, it's very different. It's kind of hard to explain, but
yeah.
But for me, when I see a pilot in the way they're using their hands on the controls, I'm immediately making the connection. Okay, that's how I'm going to use my right foot on the yoke, or on that radio knob. I'm going to turn it with my, between my big toe and second toe, in the same way the person's using their thumb and their, index finger or whatever. I don't even make that, like, I'm not thinking of it in a different way, but I can see how, because an airplane is built to be flown with your hands and your upper body, I can see the ease of flying and controlling an airplane for someone with arms is much more comfortable than for someone myself who has to elevate my feet up, be in an awkward position, and not only that, but activate some ab muscles because I'm having both feet on these controls.
Wow.
And so it is more complex for me physically to fly an airplane.
And the airplanes you fly, they're not retrofitted or anything, right?
They are not retrofitted.
Wow.
The aircraft is an airplane built in the 40s.
Amazing. So you mentioned the fear of flying, and you did that to overcome the fear. I mean, just the fear of flying is a fear enough. I know people who just the thought of getting on a plane, that's it. But you're flying it with your feet instead of your hands. What's your advice for people who, fear is fear can certainly motivate us, but fear causes people to perhaps for decades live a life they don't necessarily want to live. They've always had that business idea, but fear holds them back. They're stuck in a toxic job. There's that type of fear. There's fear of I want to ask the love of my life, or the potential love of my life to marry me. I'm fearful of whatever it is: physical fear, mental fear, career fear, relationship fear. From what you've learned in overcoming fear, what do you tell people who need some advice in terms of how can I let go?
Oh yes, it's something we all battle with. I mean, I've even had my fair share at times. And I think any task, whatever it is, whether it's flying a plane or driving a car when you're 14 years old, whatever it is, if you look at something as a whole, it will be very intimidating to see it just as a task by itself. But if you can break it down into smaller steps, it makes it a lot more achievable. If you can go through a process of, okay, this is me, for example, if I'm faced with something, I essentially will dissect the challenge into smaller steps, smaller doable steps, and it comes together as one whole. And that whole thing may come across as intimidating, but the act of flying a plane may come across as intimidating. But if you break it down to smaller steps, okay, the first thing I need to do is buckle myself in the seatbelt. So I need to figure out how to buckle up this 4-point safety harness that keeps you safe in an airplane. And then from there, I got to figure out how to, eventually take off and put my foot on the yoke to pull back on the yoke. If you break it down to smaller steps, it makes it a lot easier and less intimidating.
Wow, that's great. That's awesome advice. And you do a lot of speaking. Was public? I mean, I know people who public speaking to them, they would rather cliff dive. than get in front of an audience. Is that something that came naturally to you, or you had to is that a fear you had to overcome and get used to that?
Well, the last time I delivered a speech, like for when we were talking about Tel Aviv for the TEDx speech, my heart was pounding backstage, and I still have a little bit of butterflies. I mean, I'm not completely comfortable to the level that I don't get nervous before speaking. And there's nothing wrong with having a little bit of nerves. So I always say, it actually makes me a better speaker to have a little bit of nerves behind my speech.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So Taekwondo, tell us about Taekwondo. And is that something else was it something where you're like, well, I want to try Taekwondo, or was it more of I'm going to overcome this challenge now? I don't have enough challenges in my life. I'm going to overcome this now.
Well, actually, Taekwondo came to me very early in life. I was 10 when I started Taekwondo.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So we were faced with the challenges of modifying a martial art that does include hand movements like punches and blocks. And luckily, with the help of instructors and some students, we modified Taekwondo, which actually translates to hand-foot art. We were able to modify that martial art to work and customize it for me, someone without arms, and do the moves in a way that I'm essentially substituting, say, for example, a punch with a knee strike.
Oh, wow.
Or a left-hand strike with a side kick. And as long as there's substitutions and I'm not just standing there and not doing anything, then I'm actually performing the forms and the expectations that you need to be able to achieve your black belt.
Wow. Wow. On the, and I saw some pictures of you doing Taekwondo and some of the kick, like if I tried to do that, I'd fall down, I'd be like this. And you mentioned the abs, getting your abs up and doing the abs work. Have you just over time gotten so strong in some area? I mean, I think about, you do things with your feet. Like I get foot cramps if I try to do something with my toe. Have you had to add extra exercises in to do that? Or does it just, like you mentioned the abs, does that just come naturally now because it's how it's always been?
Well, since the beginning, even from learning how to take my first steps, because I didn't have the arms to crawl or grab onto furniture like you see toddlers do when they're learning how to navigate the world, I was actually having to build up this strong core from the very beginning. So having all those years of practice has definitely helped me have a stronger core. And the toes, again, being able to do things from twist open, say, a pickle jar. I'm able to do that because my toes have been used my entire life in the same way that people have learned to use their fingers.
Amazing. And so there's either a grand or a baby grand piano behind you.
Yes, grand. Yes.
And you can play that?
I have played a couple tunes with my toes.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm teaching my son piano now, and I haven't played in a long time, and it's tough. It's tough enough for me. It's amazing to me. I'm a Gallup certified strengths coach. And so we focus on it's about amplifying your strengths and managing weaknesses. And a lot of, the common development model in our society is called deficit-based, which is focus on your weaknesses and try to fix them. And so when I speak to a lot of people, they don't quite maybe get what I'm talking about. And I use some different examples. And it's not about ignoring your weaknesses. You can do things to manage them. In business, you can delegate them. You can outsource. You can hire people, right? And sometimes I'll give the example of there was an NBA Hall of Famer named Larry Bird, and he was not slow. He described himself as a slow white guy who couldn't jump, right? But he could shoot the ball and pass the ball, and he focused on that. And he's a Hall of Famer, right? He was never going to be as fast or jump as high as Michael Jordan, no matter what he did. For you, you could focus real hard on trying to grow arms. It ain't going to happen, right? And you tried prosthetics and it actually it didn't come naturally to you. So you focus on your strengths that you have. How do you, there's some people who don't they're so used to focusing on their weaknesses. Fix your weaknesses, fix your weaknesses. Gallup has done polls that say 77% of parents think their kids should focus more on the subjects in which they do worst. And so they talk to their kids more about the D than they do about the A. And, I don't know, I guess to you, does that make sense? And how does that, for someone who can't get out of that rut and they're so used to focusing on their weaknesses, what can you tell them for someone you're like, listen, I have the strengths I was born with and I focus on those. I mean, playing the piano with your feet, flying planes, doing Taekwondo, etc.
Well, I mean, I have to be honest. Like, for example, something I'm still working on is tying my hair in a ponytail.
Wow.
So I'm still wondering how I'm going to figure that one out. But in the meantime, my husband has learned how to do a really good ponytail. And I can focus my energies and my time on the things that I can be good at. And like you said, delegating those other things that may be more challenging, like as basic as getting a ponytail tied in my hair. But for me, I'm able to focus on the things that I love to do. And I just don't want to waste the time to focus it in a negative energy.
Wow. That's awesome. That's awesome. So speaking of energy, you right now, or you're shortly, right, are about to embark on the tour. And it's the Think and Grow Rich tour. You're going to be touring. I know I saw Dallas in there, San Diego, cities all around the country. Can you tell us how that came about? And then definitely get to how can people get involved? How can they get tickets? Who else is speaking? And how that came about?
Okay, well, Think and Grow Rich is a book that's been around since the 30s. It was probably one of the first business self-help books. And so it's been around as a business book and has been referenced for many, many years. And now that they've created the Think and Grow Rich legacy, there's a documentary about it available online. And now they're doing a tour that's being licensed by the Think and Grow Rich Napoleon Hill Foundation. They're licensing out this speaking tour with amazing speakers from around the country who will be giving feedback on business advice. I'll be doing a motivational speech. There will also be musicians there, some well-known musicians that people may have heard of. There's also even a dance group. It's just like going to be a huge concert and motivational event. And I'm going to be speaking and sharing my life along with a number of other people. And we're just thrilled to share how our life relates to these principles in the Think and Grow Rich book. For me, it's desire and the importance of having imagination and faith. And I share about how my life has been changed with that, with how desire has moved me to do so much in my life and not giving up by using the power of imagination. At one point in my training as a pilot, I felt like everyone had given up on this possibility. And I just remember pulling up a picture of an airplane, putting it on the backdrop of my computer. And every morning I'd just spend a couple seconds envisioning what it would be like, imagining what it would be like to really fly this plane, despite all the setbacks I faced over a course of 2 years. And sure enough, with that power of envisioning what it would look like, I ended up finding my final flight trainer who took me on as a student and helped me continue my training and get to solo flight and then achieve my pilot certificate.
Wow, that's amazing. The desire, piece of it. I think so many people, and me included, can fall into that rut of, when you're a kid. Oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be this. I want to be my son wants to be a spy. I want to be this. I want to be a movie director. I want to be this. And then somewhere along the line, often that can kind of get squeezed out of people. And maybe it's, maybe it's society at large. I use a term coerced conformity, kind of get back in line, do what you're supposed to do. And so it becomes more about what's responsible, what's realistic, what's pragmatic. And so when I ask people, when I work with clients, I say, what's the desired lifestyle? If you could wave a magic wand and be in your desired lifestyle in a year from now, what does that look like? And it's such a simple activity. It's one of the most difficult activities I ask people to do because they become so conditioned to think in terms of needs or what am I supposed to do versus what do I actually want to do? And so I love hearing you talk about that and the desire and you had setbacks. I'm sure there were people told you couldn't do it. And there's a lot of people who listen to that and they get back in line. You kept pushing toward it. That's just amazing.
Thank you. And everyone has it in them. They just have to dig deep enough to pull it out and pull out that resilience, that persistence, and really tap into something that we all have. And just like anything, it's, a muscle is weak if it's never used. And if we are never, really tested by being challenged in whatever way or challenging ourselves with new opportunities, then we have a weak muscle. But if we constantly push ourselves, it becomes stronger over time, so that when it comes to a big time challenge, instead of just completely giving up, you have a muscle that's built up to fight through it.
What, and I guess when you talk about visioning as well, I've read about the Olympic gold medalist, 20 times over, something, Michael Phelps, and how his extreme use of visioning throughout his career. And he would every day have to sit there and he would put his headphones on and he would envision everything from the gun going off to him hitting the water, every stroke. So that when he got in the race, he had already done that race in his head, 20 times. And I think a lot of people hear that. And, 10 years ago, I'm sure I read it or something like it. And I was like, yeah, that's just a bunch of, people talk about mindset and that's just, phooey. Other than the flying planes, where else do you use visioning and how do you use that?
Wow. Well, for me, if there's anything that maybe I'm faced with in the business world, I have to envision with the end in mind. And that always helps you get closer to achieving that goal. And that same thing, the importance of having a vision of what you want. I'm trying to think of something recently. Oh yeah, something more probably recent was when I wanted to achieve, I went out to achieve a state champion title in Taekwondo. Wow. And I knew for a fact that I did not want to compete in what's called special abilities. And that's essentially an area for people who have different challenges or obstacles, physical or mental or psychological. And I decided I wanted to compete in my ring with competitors, my same ring and my age, which is like anyone else who would want to go in to compete. And I said, I'm going to set a goal to become a state champion. And I had this envision of the state champion title on the back of my uniform, which anyone who does acquire that level gets to have the uniform with the title. And I envisioned that in my head, what it would look like, and just kept fighting for it. And I didn't always get first place in all the tournaments, but over time, after a year's worth of competitions, my points stacked up so that I earned the title for Arizona State Champ.
Oh my goodness.
In Taekwondo Association. And I realized that was another, affirmation to me that if you do have that power of vision of what you want to achieve, it is achievable.
That's amazing. What, going back to the tour real quick, I'm on the website. So it starts in early May.
Yes.
And goes through basically all through November. Mm-hmm. So you're going to be all over the country. I'm going to post links to the website, but May 3rd, Anaheim, Rosemont, Illinois, which is right outside of Chicago. You're going to be in San Diego, San Jose, Seattle, Phoenix, Boston, New York, Nashville, Orlando, Tampa, San Antonio, Houston, Dallas, and Atlanta. So you're going to be busy this year.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're going to definitely post that. If you're in any of those areas, check out the notes, and please go and see Jessica. Are you? Is it kind of a keynote and then you do some breakouts too, or is it? What's the format of the tour?
Every business speaker will have a certain amount of time allotted to them. There will not be a breakout, but it is going to be a big venue, and we'll be speaking from the stage. You can take value from every speaker, which is what's so incredible about it, is that, there's these speakers in different fields like sales and insurance and that type of different fields. And I do want to mention though, if you do want to apply the discount code
great.
for attending this event, if you make sure that you type in my discount code, which is ATI, and that's basically achieve the impossible. And if you type that in, you'll be able to get a $200 discount on the event.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes.
Wonderful. We'll put that in the show notes, and wherever we post videos, we'll put that in for everyone watching live stream, note that down, but we'll put that in our Facebook group as well, because we have a lot of people in those cities where you're going to be going. We'll put links in there. So what's before the tour? What's coming up for you over the next, well, I guess that's less than a month away, isn't it? I was thinking that May, the year is going by. What do you got coming up other than the tour?
Well, the tour is pretty much going to take up most of my time, but I just discussed with someone last night about the possibility of working on a harness that would allow me to attempt to do some rock climbing. And so that will be a physical challenge in the coming months, how to actually rock climb without arms and hands, and designing. I'm talking to an engineer about this. How would that work for me to hold my body weight up as well as be able to use my feet to climb up a rock? So that's something that I'm working on right now.
Oh my gosh. We've talked about the flying. We've talked about the Taekwondo. We talked about now rock climbing. We talked about piano playing. What else is there? What else is on the list?
Well, see, that's the thing. When you start taking these challenges and you reap the benefits of achieving a challenge, it's kind of like this high that you experience. And so you want to do something else. And then you want to do more and more, because you realize this kind of boost of confidence that comes with achieving some goal really is addicting in a way. I'm just constantly, whatever comes across my path, I don't even know what I'll be doing in another month or two, because who knows, there might be another great opportunity out there.
Well, that's amazing. Well, Jessica, I want to thank you so much for taking the time I know you're traveling a lot, for taking the time to join us on the Freedom Club podcast. I really, really appreciate it. We're going to put links to everything in the show notes. We'll put where they can find the tour, the discount code, and all that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.